to be comfortable in this position?
Like for me, it's as straight as possible, but
And was
Karen, she turns it quite different.
I guess for me, out of our discussion, there was 3 points that we sort of got from it. One was Martina suggested that it immobilizes your shoulder muscles, so you use your you have to mobilize throughout your spine and thoracic sort of area. Then we sort of concluded that putting your hand across means you're lengthening one side already and shortening the other side, so you already create a curve that might help with the circle. And then with the hand position and the head, I guess for me it was a lot about the question, does it help in your orientation in space? Like, does it help you to orientate, to come to lie in a certain way?
So kind of what Martine was saying in terms of tending to turn the head and leading in your particular direction.
Yeah. So with the
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we also thought, for one thing, it interrupts your habitual habits with your shoulder girdle.
Yes.
And another thing was, I think you could explain best. Your point.
Interrupt habitual organisation.
So, like what we discussed was one point, like we try to inhibit the habitual patterns, and by giving feedback that this is not you can touch this way as well, your face.
Yes.
So giving your brain an idea of that there is another way of touching, like perceiving the feeling of touch.
Okay, so the crossing the midline, the neurological aspect of that.
Yes.
Yep.
And the second thing we thought was so like I remember Julie talked about we have to find the handle to lead any movement. So by putting this hand, we are actually, so C1, C2 are the most mobile vertebrae. So we're giving that feedback to our brain that we can, it's a one part, it's all connected. And that gives that proprioception, like feedback or touch or connection to our brain that this is all one, like a steel, and then we're going to lead the movement and feel that movement, because that is our thoracic spine is our blind spot. That was so we're moving that rod of a steel.
Which bit's the rod of steel?
So like if spine is all connected, so it's C1, C2, every vertebra is connected, it's all one. And we are leading.
They're linked as a system.
Yep. So and then we leading the movement, that making it. Maybe you can explain. I don't know.
Well, no, you've got the ideas in there. You've absolutely got the ideas in there, and maybe we'll hear from some other people because they'll say the same thing in a different way that might tease out the several ideas that you've got in there.
Yes.
I could.
I think maybe it will encourage the connection between the left and the right brain. If you do something like that.
Yes, bringing the hand round here. It requires, that's the neurological aspect. It requires an integration of the left and right.
And it will grow actually the part which connects the two brains.
It's possible.
So this idea of doing that anchoring.
So what
and,
are you
and rolling?
Anchoring?
Well, not anchoring. Well,
just want to tease out that anchoring a little.
So extend it, raising the shoulder blade up and lengthening the rib cage along one side and shortening along the other, and then doing the rolling movements. It's actually essentially you're rolling the head, but using the whole of your torso to do it. So the hips come into play, and then I think, when we were doing the jiggling one, so can
I just note a point? So you're moving the head from elsewhere? from anywhere in particular?
Well, the shoulders and the back and the hips.
And the spine. And what's at the other end of the spine? The hips.
The hips.
Which?
Pelvis.
Pelvis.
Yeah. Yep. And really, ideally, through the legs as well. You know, and I mean, there was a moment where when we were having to, when we were sort of jiggling and feeling the movement run through, you can feel it through the heels of your feet right through to the top. So it's a précis that rolling the head, but not just through isolating the top of the neck, but actually bringing the whole of your body into that movement.
So I'll just refine the language, because here, would you say you're actually, I mean, on the floor, you could say you're rolling the head, but would it be more accurate to say you're moving the head through space?
Yes, it would be more accurate.
That's okay, because it's just, it's hard to find the language to describe our observations and our feelings. So you have done rolling the head, and there is a certain understanding of a Feldenkrais language, which you can put in other terms, but we'll just try and refine it a little bit. It's
almost rotating your body through space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because when it was lying on the side and
microphones
coming over, so your head then goes, so the front of your face was on the floor and then rolling back onto your back. That, to me, that's what I'm loosely describing as turning the head. But yeah, it's rolling your whole body through space, but doing it by not just turning your head as you can isolate that movement, but actually bringing your whole torso into the movement.
So this actually constrains, which is what you've anchored, constrains, a very non-habitual organisation of, in order to engage your whole self in a different way. Yeah.
Which in the end is actually really beautiful. There's a really beautiful fluidity about it. You're like, all of a sudden I'm on my front and I haven't really done anything, and all of a sudden I'm on my back and I haven't really done anything, because everything's connected and your head just goes along for the ride.
How our moving should be. That harmonious, smoothly coordinated action that feels pleasing to oneself, as opposed to our more usual, habitual sense of ourselves in action, where things are difficult, or we make them difficult and don't even know it. Great. Any more from that group while the microphone's over there? Oh, we got it. Yep.
I think we're so used to moving our head through space with our cervical spine or our necks. I don't know, the image of my body, I sort of think, because that's a separate part sticking out of my body, I sort of think this section moves a bit more. I don't know whether other people perceive that as well, but I think this restriction sort of lumps this area together a little bit and stops that from moving as much, which is our habitual, and then we're forced to use the lower parts of our spine to move our head through space, I guess, or to be more aware of that, perhaps.
Yes. So the cervical spine is one of the most, some of the most greatest degrees of freedom of all the 24 vertebrae of the spine. And you know yourself that because it's easy to move, often it can become disassociated from the rest of our movements, so we become a head and a neck, like this. And in this position, you are not able to use those degrees of freedom. Do you want to say something? Thank you.
I think I don't have great rotation lately in my cervical spine. Over the last year or so, I had a little injury, and I thought that this really freed up my cervical spine on the other hand, but can see what you mean as well. And also found the chest really had to get involved in swinging around the whole area to enable me to really move around, where often my chest is and we talked about lots of things, but they've all gone out of my head. you think they've been covered?
I think quite a few.
Or say them again if you've got a different way of saying them, because it's interesting to hear.
One of the things that we spoke about was that 360-degree awareness, and being able to, so the hand behind the head, increasing our awareness of what was behind us, which we are not very aware of. And then obviously, as you come around as well, you need to kind of be aware of what's behind you as you're lying down as well. So just an exploration of that space with your other hand on the floor as well.
And maybe the other thing we spoke about was in terms of really feeling that weight shift that had to be involved across the pelvis in terms of creating that arc of movement was something that, was quite enjoyable, that potentially I don't tend to do a lot of. I'm quite rigid in terms of some of my movements. So
it helped free your pelvis to move.
Yeah, and actually feel that weight shifting across from left to right. So
freeing the pelvis to move. Beautiful writing, Ruth.
I was just thinking about what you said, Yona, about it freeing up your cervical spine. I think that the idea of it is that when you are more efficient at using the lower parts of your spine, then the strain on your cervical spine is less, and that's perhaps what you felt with the release up there. I don't know, that's just my idea, but perhaps that could explain.
No, well, I think that could be it, because I think in my mind that lesson was about your whole spine being engaged. So the flexor extensor end of your spine had to be fully there, and then your thoracic had to be fully involved, and then your cervical had to come along, and the top two, even in order to choose whether you wanted to do this or this, you had to use your top two to go, well, where do I want to go? So I think, it kind of just really brought it all together nicely, which meant that I guess if you had anything anywhere in your spine, you might notice in that lesson.
And also, if you have difficulty in a particular area, do you want to comment on that, Anka?
You go first, but yeah, I'd like to.
If you have a difficulty somewhere in yourself, you may have the experience, usually, of not being as clear as your movement can be there, and there's a feeling of tension, or our image is not as clear. So there's often, in the areas that we don't feel, that are outside of our awareness, that are in that blind spot, as we talked about yesterday, we've used ourselves in ways that we keep on creating extra work, that it both inhibits the motion, limits our self-image, and when you give that area an opportunity not to work, because even with that tension, we still try and keep using that area in the way that we know how to use it most commonly. When you give it a rest, when you bring in, as Priscilla was saying, other areas of the spine to participate and contribute, your nervous system, the pattern of holding, is disrupted. It's inhibited. So you have the opportunity of changing the tension, as Margaret found yesterday when she said she always had tension in her shoulders. And after doing this and exploring how she was moving, your focus isn't on it in the same way, although it can be depending on how much you try and be in this position. You know, if you really try to do it well, then it could have brought your attention more to that area, more stress to that area, if you're going outside your comfortable limits. But by using this configuration and organizing yourself in space, in relationship to the floor, and finding pathways of movement that you haven't used for a long time, it creates a huge shift in the excitation of your nervous system.
What excitation?
That's excitation. For me to talk, my brain's got to get excited. It's got to fire impulses to, different parts of my brain, and then to organize my muscles. So it's the excitation that, hopefully has a useful outcome. And sometimes it's just unnecessary excitation that we don't know is unnecessary. And that's the things where we're holding our legs. We're used to using our legs in a particular way. The muscles are strong, they're a little bit stiff and tight. So our brain is continuing to send impulses to keep ourselves in that organisation until we sense it, feel it, and start to be able to interrupt it a little bit.
With that holding the head, I guess also comes putting the eyes in a different orientation, so you don't use the eyes to locate in space. And that means you have to just fully engage sensing along all of your side in order to land on the ground softly.
Mm-hmm.
So the more distinctive you can, like finer you can open, like and engage with the floor, the safer you land, I guess. You don't just plump.
Did others find that too? Or in thinking, reflecting on Anka's words, taking your eyes out of that usual orientation brought you more into sensing? Yeah.
And the major shift for me after those lessons always was feeling really incredibly grounded on the floor. Like I have what you said, like I have a lot of tension through my middle. So often I sense when I'm walking or standing, I sense I'm floating in my hip area above the ground. I don't have such a strong connection to the weight on the floor. And through the lessons, like I'm coming more and more aware that sometimes that totally shifts and I get a sense of really being grounded on the floor, and this ATM does that a lot for me, that I just fully, I don't have to use my eyes, I just fully just trust that sense of the weight on the ground, and that's, I think, to do with just fully freeing up that whole spinal area. Yeah.
So organising the torso, or
inclusive awareness, or kinetic self-awareness, or
yeah.
I don't know. Proprioception, like I guess the proprioception replacing the eye.
So we've got change of orientation of the eyes.
Oh, the priorities maybe. Like maybe it's like my body suddenly can rely priorly more on the sensation rather than the visual.
So you may have heard Julie talk about the sensory motor experience. So rather than the visual input, you're really perceiving.
Yeah, and together with letting go of that excessive tension.
So changing the tonus. Did other people feel that effect in terms of lying on the back after that lesson? Much more contact?
I think that's not right. That has got nothing with the tonus. I think with her it's just instead of using her eyes to check out the floor where she's going, she can use her feet more where she's going. Because you said you're floating.
Yeah, I'm floating because I'm holding in here, like.
So what we're looking for is not necessarily the analysis of it, or whether, it's one way's right or one way's wrong, because whatever happens, it does create a change of tonus through the whole system. Part of that could be because by constraining the neck, did anyone find that the head rolled more easily? So you're freeing the head, the neck, the eyes, which has a huge effect on the tonus of the body. And once the system is less occupied, the nervous system is less occupied by unnecessary work in the system, then our proprioceptive mechanisms do get clearer information from the feet, from the floor, from somewhere else.
When you were saying at the end of the lesson, keeping your arm in line with the spine, that suddenly
say keep.
try.
Yeah. Okay.
Try getting your arm as an extension of your spine. That I found putting quite a bit strain on my neck, because I was really nice and loose, and after I'd done really trying to be upright, I actually had a bit headache.
Yeah. So it wasn't about get it there, but it is about that's a possibility, and to bring your attention to where your elbow was oriented relative to your spine. So in most awareness through movement lessons, you're given eventually guides of the direction you're going in. And then it's about how do you sit with yourself as a learner to hear the instruction, to feel what you're doing, to check whether what you're doing is conforming or linking to the instruction, and also considering your comfort and ease, because if you're not comfortable and easy, feeling comfortable, you're unlikely to learn, except that that's a stretch and that's painful. But it is possible to bring the elbow, the arm, your whole self into this configuration where the arm is behind the head, the hand holds the chin, and the elbow is in the direction of the line of the spine. So anyone able to do that? No. That's okay.
I found it generally difficult to figure out where to stop. Generally, throughout the lessons, I find it difficult to find out how far do I push it. I found that a hard thing to work out for myself.
How many others have that difficulty?
I'm in good company.
Yes, it's universal, and it's always an ongoing process. I tell you from my experience, I used to push until I got pain. And often I didn't feel the pain at the time, but I have the pain the next day. And then I had to gradually bring that towards one another. What did I do? What could I listen to? What could I recognize that didn't take me into that extreme? So it's a process. And we continue to develop and refine it for the rest of our lives. Never ends. So it's great that you're recognizing it now, and more in the moment. Maybe you could, we'll talk about, because that's something we'll talk about later in the week. You know, what strategies you have for that. Come back to that. Okay, any other comments, questions?
Just a question. I wonder if the vestibular system, there's a question, is that affected by this bizarre
Absolutely.
thing?
So influences.
Oh, is it balanced?
It's
in your inner ear?
Yes. Well, it is the vestibular system connected with the eyes that is the governing, orchestrator of our balance. Did you want to say anything else, Mike?
I just thank you.
Danielle for.
Thanks, Daniel. I wanted the other system, because where we've got change of orientation of eyes, what I'm going is I think my eyes are my teleceptors, and what I'm getting is my other systems are getting to run it, not my eyeballs, and so they're on hold, and it's fabulous to have a holiday.
And it's huge, the possible influence on one's vestibular system if you're used to holding your head in a particular configuration or relationship with the rest of yourself. You start moving your head around like this in space in very different ways, can really perturb that system. Anyone feel nauseous?
Yes.
Yeah, but not during the ATMs themselves. Just when I was touched where I couldn't.
Move easily, yeah.
I just thought that with the constraining configuration, what's become evident to me, and particularly demonstrated by Jonna, was the fact that you don't need to move your shoulders to actually lift your arm up. Really, you can use your whole pelvis, and your body has this internal support that you can generate to actually move your shoulder. And it was just so beautifully demonstrated when she was shortening one side and just, it's like Tai Chi. But you don't really lift your arms up, and you just basically move your whole body to lift one part. And it just gives me so much more comfort in my shoulders, because I'm not walking around like this anymore. My shoulders are being supported by the rest of my body.
Is that clear for you? It's not lifting the shoulders like this?
From something someone else said, I just remembered that last night for the first time, and I can't remember when, I slept on my stomach for at least part of the night. And I remember when I got there and I was comfortable, I was like, that must have been the lesson yesterday. I don't know why. I assume it's the movement in the neck. But I was like, it's amazing all the things that it opens up that you don't even think of, because I didn't think about lying on the stomach at all yesterday, but it helps reorganize me so I could.
So, unexpected outcomes. Huge.
Isn't that Feldenkrais in a nutshell?
It can be. And it thank you, Yona, because it highlights, you know, in my practice, often when I'm working with people, I can have an idea of what might make a difference in their life, or what, you know, might help them be more comfortable in themselves, but it is unpredictable. There is always a degree of unpredictability. And because it's you creating evoking the whole system to move in different ways, the outcomes can be unexpected and emerge in surprising places, contexts, or relationships that you weren't expecting. Jenny, did you want us to add?
Well, my unexpected outcome last night was I tried sleeping on the front, the back, the side, but I kept waking up doing hip circles. So if I nod off during the day, it'll be because of those bloody hip circles. Absolutely. They were pretty good hip circles, Mike.
Yeah.
When you let the unconscious mind do the driving rather than the conscious mind, you often get a better result.
Yeah. We'll just sit him like that. I just wanted to give you a visual image. Sorry, I haven't quite Lee Chim. What her name? Chilim? Yes, I haven't got the pronunciation, so that's why I hesitated. To just go a little further with what she was saying there about not using your shoulders in the usual way, but in order to, which is true, but in order to bring your arm upwards to this position, there is actually quite a degree of movement of the shoulder girdle, the scapula, and as few of you were saying, the ribs on one side were lengthening, and some of you may even have found a degree of rotation and a movement of the shoulder girdle that facilitates. So if you bring your hand up behind your head in that direction now, do you feel one shoulder moving forwards or backwards relative to the other? So try and do it without letting your left shoulder or the other shoulder go backwards. So all of a sudden it feels impossible. Yeah. Well, one reason could be because it adds extra strain. You know, you're doing more work to immobilize one side of yourself than if your chest is free. But your chest can't be free. I mean, it's a whole chain of events. You do need to feel the ground. You need to feel that support, that you can shift your weight left and right, that your spine starts to connect your pelvis, the power of your pelvis, to your head, and you start using them in relationship to one another, which is something that most people, I'd say most, in my practice, think of themselves as a head, arms, and legs. And this is, a no-go zone. Their self-image is really unclear there. So you did a great, yeah?
It's definitely was. You've got the skeleton out.
Yes.
This is the bit that I was terribly confused.
Mm-hmm.
If we are using, where's the one?
We've lost it.
There it is. It is about the left arm. About the left arm moving forward as, because my shoulder is moving back on the left as my right shoulder is moving forward to get to this configuration. I can't seem to find this bit of organization in me to be able to move my left arm forward when my shoulder is going back.
Anyone got a suggestion?
I don't know what I'm not organizing.
Try it the other way.
Yeah, my left
shoulder forward as your right one comes back.
That one's going back. No, this way. Right.
No, do it the other way.
Right, the exercise we were doing yesterday.
Yeah. So if you maintain a fixed relationship, that also engages your musculature in a particular way. But in this position, you're looking to initially to bring your arm behind there.
Okay.
There is one particular coordination. But then how do you use the rest of yourself between your head and your pelvis to then be able to change the orientation? So it's how can you keep knowing where the two sides of yourself are, and the front and the back and your whole torso, in order to enable you to change the relationships within yourself in such a way that you can move in the direction that's being asked. So it's not setting one shoulder back and one shoulder forwards, or one shoulder forwards and one shoulder back, because each of you will have a slightly different organization through your experience that will enable you maybe to do it more easily one way than another way.
I find putting the hands on made a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
The awareness was just like, wow, I can really feel it now. Nothing to feel now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in her situation, if she just naturally So if you just naturally do it the opposite way, like put the right shoulder forward, whereas it seems like a lot of people do it the other way, and then it makes it easy, makes the left arm go forward easily. So if it's for her, it's the opposite way. It's about finding a way in that configuration that still she can do it.
We're not looking for one way. This is the thing. We're not looking for one way. First of all, we look to make it a little bit easier. And you found how through the progression of the lessons and moving in, there were many strategies in those lessons that I'm just going to point, that Moshe utilizes. Maybe some of those worked for you yesterday, maybe not. Maybe some of those will make more difference when you go back to them another time. So first of all, getting a little bit familiar, and then noticing how you're doing it, and then gradually expanding it into a larger movement that brings more and more of yourself into the action, so that you could then, or while doing it in different ways. So we played with sliding one hand forwards. Where do you put the left hand when the right hand is behind the head? We played with both hands on the floor, sweeping around. And we're going to do some more today of variations that bring in more possibilities. So trying another way, as I think you were, as Simon was saying, and noticing whether you're noticing your blind spot. How do you notice that you're not moving somewhere or not changing a particular relationship? And that's why touch is very, very useful for that.
So unless there is some, like, so in terms of just the skeleton, it would be, there would be a way that just like the left hand forward would be probably the most, that there would be a sort of order of efficiency or something, but then there is our individuality that maybe makes something harder, and then the variation helps us to expand our individual pathway and maybe add to it or give other options. So maybe you can find that you can move the left shoulder forward, or maybe you can't, but maybe you can still find a similar movement or something like that. Yeah, okay.
It's great. I mean, Anka's just given a little descriptor in a way of how lessons might be structured. Creating what's a context that is most likely to be easiest to find a particular configuration, relationship, pathway, and then gradually developing at that so it's not fixed as that way, but it can develop other alternatives. So in the end, you can do it anyway. Which is, so yesterday we rolled down to the left, holding the chin, and to the right, holding the chin with the right hand. We're doing it both ways. And so and it evokes, because to change the direction, you have to change the orientation, the turning, where the twisting's happening, how the side, where and when the side bending is happening, and in particular, elicits some movement in this usually very stable area in most of ourselves, in the chest and ribs.
Sorry, I'll
pass
on in a second.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, the only other thing that I noticed, just in reflecting, and Anka had made me think of it before, was that my confidence with my contact with the floor and getting lower to the floor increased. So it was almost like I didn't realise I was scared of falling on the floor or anything. But as I came forward, I almost got to a point where it wasn't that anything was stretching, but I sort of held it there and went, that's as close as I want to get to the floor. Whereas by the end, I was much more confident to be down there, lower on the floor. And it was making me think about, people with balance problems and falls and things like that, and how even though, they always say to do things upright on your feet to work on balance, this could actually be really effective for those sort of people in building confidence with the floor in a position that's already closer to the floor and that kind of thing. So
again, it's one of those unexpected outcomes, and it highlights why it's so interesting to hear other people's experiences of the lesson, so that you expand your understanding and broaden your awareness of the possibilities.
Many moons ago, I did a movement and dance degree, and we were put into what they called a kinesphere, and it was a gigantic ball that we had to go into the centre of, and it was based on the planes of movement, the table plane and the wheel plane and the door plane, and in between that there were all these lines that were all just joining it all up. And when we went inside it, we had to sort of take our elbow to different places in that kinesphere, or our little toe, or our head, and it just forced us to sort of involve parts of our body that we hadn't even thought about using, and it was a wonderful tool to go into and just realise that there's this whole world out there that you can move into rather than just go forward and backwards and sideways, and your ribs could go up or down or forward or back, or all these different planes that you could move around in.
Fabulous, thank you. And see how that links in what was about the 360 degrees, the changing the spatial, including exploring this kinesphere around us. Yeah. We'll do some more with that later in the week too. Okay, let's take a little break, just 5 minutes, and we'll come back and do some ATM. That's great. Do we get this 360 degrees? It's a 360 degrees space. So it was up here, but you could put it down here. So please lie on your back. No. So lie on your back and notice how the floor feels to you this